All right. John chapter 9 today. John chapter 9. John chapter 9 contains another miracle that Jesus does by healing this blind man. And I always find this one interesting because Jesus spits on the ground and makes mud out of some dirt and then rubs it on the guy's eyes and then tells him to go and wash in the pool. I just think that's a funny way to do it. Like, there's so many ways that Jesus has been healing people. He's healed people from a distance. He heals people with a touch. People were healed because they touched the hem of his garment. I don't know why Jesus decided to spit in the dirt and put it on his eyes, but he did. And to me, that's just a testimony that the way God works in our lives is different every single time. God might heal you miraculously. God might heal me through medical science. God might heal somebody else through changing a diet. I don't know. But God works in all kinds of different ways. And I think that's one of the things that this miracle points to. But as you read in John chapter 9, you see that Jesus walked by and that Jesus is the one that found the blind man. The blind man didn't come to Jesus. Jesus found him. And so here's another testimony and story of how God goes to the people that are hurting. He doesn't just wait for them to come to him. He goes to them. So Jesus went to this man who was blind. And of course, people ask, whose fault is it that this man is blind? They said, did he sin? They wanted to know, did he sin or did his parents sin? Whose fault is it that this man was born blind? And Jesus doesn't really get into that debate. He doesn't say, well, it's their fault or it's this person's fault. He doesn't blame anybody. He just says, look, this man's blind so that God can be glorified through him, right? He says in verse 3, it was neither this man that sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. I think there are so many times in our life where we try to point a finger at someone and we try to blame somebody for problems that we're facing or hard times that we're going through or hurt feelings that we have. We try to always blame someone. And it might be somebody's fault. It might not be somebody's fault. It might be our own fault. But at the end of the day, let's change our focus, right? Jesus changed their focus. Don't worry about why he's blind. Just worry about what I'm going to do because of it. And I'm going to give him his sight back. Don't always worry about the why of bad things and just focus on the good that God's going to do in it. Because in life, guys, I'm telling you this, you might not always know why. You might not always know the answer to that question. When I was in high school, I was 16 years old, and one of my best friends died in a car accident on his way to the homecoming dance. It was a horrible night for all of us. Got hit head on by a fellow student, actually, who had been drinking. And so he got hit by a drunk driver and died the next day in the hospital. And it was tragic. And I remember arguing with God, fighting with God. Why, God? Why would this happen? Why could you let this happen? How could you let this happen? And I've never received a good answer to that. But what I've learned to do is to not be so tore up about the why and not having that answer, but to focus on what God has done through that tragic event and what God's did in my life in that moment. How God saw me through that moment, how God comforted me in that moment. That's where the focus and the emphasis needs to be. And so I just want to encourage you with that today, that we're not always going to know why bad things happen, but we can always know the one that's going to see us through those bad things. And we can put our faith in, and we can put our trust in him. And so that's this miracle that he's talking about here. And he goes on, and there's all kinds of other things that happen in this chapter, the arguing and the bickering back and forth that goes on. And then Jesus makes this interesting comment at the end where he says that those who do not see may see. This is why he came. And those who see may become blind. Jesus uses this transformative moment in this guy's life to make a point. That there are people in this world who don't realize their weaknesses, don't realize their faults or their failures, don't even recognize their own sin. And those are the people that are blind. And Jesus said, I came to show people who they really are. And in other words, to give us our sight. This gentleman that Jesus healed, I'm telling you, he knew he was blind and therefore was willing to receive God's healing power. Before we can receive God's healing power in our life, we have to understand who we really are. So we have to have our sight. If we are saying that we are not blind and that we are perfect, in other words, if we're saying that we are without sin, Jesus came to convince us that that's just not true. Jesus came to show us our faults, to show us how far from him we really are and how much we desperately need him. And when we finally get to the place in our life where we can say, okay, God, I need you, that's when God steps in and gives us our sight back. Right? So guys, I want you today to surrender yourselves to him. Let him give you your sight back. Don't get caught up in lots of the questions that are floating around and lots of the arguments that are floating around. We may never have a great answer for a lot of those things, but we can know the one who can get us through those things. We might not know why we're blind, but we just know that we are. And Jesus is the one that can bring healing to our lives. Total and complete transformation. Guys, trust in him today. He came to give the blind sight. Guys, God bless you all. And we'll see you tomorrow as we get into John chapter 10. Have a good one.